Happy New Year and welcome back to television. With the passing of 2016, we now have a brand new year of lots and lots of TV to look forward to. And after what was considered to be the golden year for television, this is certainly going to be a hard year to follow up. But to kick off the new year, we are starting off with the first official TV premiere, and that is for the 4th season, or series if we're being British snobs, but we're not, of the critically acclaimed series Sherlock. However, because this series is structured much differently from American television shows in terms of the fact that each season occurs every 2 years, as well as the fact that each season only consists of 3 hour-and-a-half episodes, I'm going to be doing something a little bit different. So rather than just doing a straight up recap of all the previous seasons followed by a daily recap of each episode, what I will be doing instead is I'm going to be ranking each of the 10 episodes that have come out for Sherlock, and I will conclude with a recap and review of the entire 4th series once it concludes. So without further ado, here are my official rankings of all 10 episodes of Sherlock that have been released so far. And I'm pretty sure this goes without saying, but spoilers ahead. So kicking off this list is the 2nd episode of the 1st series of the show, The Blind Banker, loosely based on the adventure of the Dancing Man, along with references to the Valley of Fear and the Sign of the Four. The 2nd episode overall of the series saw Sherlock and John investigating a break-in at the Bank of London, along with a series of other mysterious symbols sprouting up at random points throughout the city, followed up by, of course, several people turning up dead. It concluded with the revelation of a Chinese smuggling ring masquerading as acrobats. They were attempting to steal a valuable item that one of the victims stole. In my opinion, there hasn't been a bad episode of Sherlock yet, rather more that some episodes have just been a little bit weaker than others, and that was certainly the case that I found with this one. The mystery was intriguing enough, but the plot, I thought, felt all over the place. It was certainly the hardest for me to keep track of, and the ending, it just kind of ended up being just sort of unnecessary setup. Well, it was necessary, but it was just setup, and I've already made it clear that I don't really like that. So not a bad episode, especially considering it was only the 2nd episode ever released, but at the same time, not the best either. Coming in next is the series premiere, the one that started it all, the first ever episode of Sherlock, A Study in Pink. Released on July 25th, 2010, this series presented a new take on the classic detective and his trusty doctor sidekick, having been released about a year after Guy Ritchie's steampunk-themed film adaptation starring Robert Downey Jr. and Jude Law. It took place in modern-day London and saw John, portrayed by Martin Freeman fresh off of the British Office, coming home from Iraq looking for a job and being introduced to Benedict Cumberbatch's take on the detective, who, in this case, was personified as a high-functioning sociopath who, while of course extremely observant and deductive, doesn't really understand people very well. The two hit it off immediately, with Sherlock, of course, offering John residence at his flat at 221B Baker Street before whisking him off on the first case of the series to investigate a series of murders in which a bunch of people seemingly committed suicide by taking a very strange pill. We're also introduced to a majority of the other characters from Sherlock lore and their new takes, including Inspector Greg Lestrade, played by Rupert Graves, Mrs. Hudson, his maid, played by Una Stubbs, Molly Hooper, played by Louise Brealey, as well as his brother Mycroft, played by series co-creator Mark Gatiss. As far as pilots go, it was certainly one of the better pilots that I've seen, considering it had great characters I wanted to get invested in, an extremely intriguing and well-written plot, as well as set up for future encounters that didn't feel too forced. And honestly, the only reason why this episode is as low as it is because there were just so many episodes that came afterwards that ended up getting better and better and better as the series progressed. Coming in next is another 2nd episode of the series, and that would be Series 2, Episode 2, the 4th episode in the series as a whole, The Hound of Baskerville. Based off of arguably the most popular and well-known Sherlock case, this episode sees Sherlock and John investigating a mysterious Hound of Hell that seemingly killed the father of their client years before. While investigating, they discover a 20-year-old conspiracy concerning Project HOUND, or Hound, surprisingly, a military experiment that was working on weaponized hallucinogenic gas. This was a step up from the previous 2nd episode, and the only reason why it makes a stop here at number 8 is the fact that I really love the original story it was based on. It's probably my favorite classic Sherlock Holmes story, and I thought it did a really good job adapting it for modern day, as all of the episodes have done thus far. However, in terms of contributing to the overall story at hand, this episode would technically be considered filler if British TV were capable of that. However, they are not, so it isn't. Technically. Coming in at number 7 is the episode that really got me invested into the series as a whole, and that would be the Series 1 finale, The Great Game. Sherlock, still as yet unseen foe, who set up the cases he deduced in the previous 2 episodes, places a series of bombs on people around the city, and gives Sherlock a time code and a series of seemingly unrelated cases to solve in order to save them. However, being of course the high-functioning sociopathic genius that he is, Sherlock not only manages to find links between all of the cases, but he also manages to uncover the identity of the mastermind behind it all, Jim Moriarty, played in excellence by Andrew Scott, who who is hands down the best actor on the entire show. The first official encounter between the two of them is probably, in my opinion at least, the best encounter I've seen in all the iterations. Also consider the fact that Benedict Cumberbatch and Andrew Scott both do a fantastic job of portraying the detective as his nemesis, and they play off each other really well. It was this episode that finally helped me realize what a fantastic show this is, and that is why it makes my way here at number 7. Coming in at number 6 is the Series 3 premiere, The Empty Hearse. Following the explosive Season 2 finale, in which everybody thought the detective had actually committed suicide, The Empty Hearse finds everyone 2 years later having moved on. John is about to marry Mary Morstan, say that 10 times fast, and has grown a mustache, while Sherlock is revealed to have survived at the end of Season 2, has spent the last 2 years dismantling Moriarty's underground spy network. However, when Sherlock's brother Mycroft informs him of a terrorist plot that is threatening London, Sherlock makes his triumphant return, only to get the shit beat out of him once he reveals himself to John. This episode could have fallen into the trap that the pilot did at a lot of points, but it didn't, considering the ingenious approach it took to explaining how Sherlock was able to survive his fall, as well as how below the surface it really was more of a character-driven episode geared towards Sherlock repairing his relationship with John. It was one of the smartest episodes of Sherlock that I've seen yet, and my second favorite series premiere, which is why it makes it stop here at number 6. Coming in at number 5 is my favorite premiere yet, the Series 2 premiere, A Scandal in Belgravia. Based directly on A Scandal in Bohemia, the premiere finally saw the introduction of fan favorite Irene Adler, who everyone knows is Sherlock's one foil. Lara Pulver did a fantastic job portraying this femme fatale, whose first interaction with Sherlock, of course being stark nude, really showed just how well she knew her adversary and could play with him. Sherlock and John have to get back several compromising photos she has on her locked phone, and every single second she is toying with them and succeeds in several dastardly deeds, including allowing Moriarty to foil one of Mycroft's counter-terrorism operations, as well as blackmailing him. However, at the very last minute, Sherlock manages to successfully unlock her phone in the moment that ultimately became, in my opinion, the biggest internet meme of the show by deciphering Irene's one weakness, him. It showed the detective at his finest, but also showed that even though he appeared to have met someone who was finally able to bring out some emotion within him, in the end, he didn't let it get the better of him, which is why he ultimately got the leg up on her. So this is why we all need to just shut off our emotions and act like robots. Life would be so much better if that happened. Coming in at number 4 is most definitely, in my opinion, the most well-written episode yet. It was the special TV movie that was released earlier this year due to the fact that production of the 4th series was delayed because of Cumberbatch's extremely busy schedule, and that was The Abominable Bride. After Moriarty was thought to have survived his suicide and seemingly returned, Sherlock induces his mind palace to its fullest extent by using drugs to induce himself into a Victorian-era England in order to solve a centuries-old case about a bride committing suicide and then returning from the dead to murder her husband. The purpose behind this, of course, was to determine, if at all possible, how Moriarty could have survived his suicide. The fact that this could have simply been an homage to the more classic Sir Arthur Conan Doyle series, as well as the other various classic Sherlock TV series, but the fact that it was able to incorporate itself so well into the story, as well as, of course, bringing back Andrew Scott as Moriarty, who audiences, including myself, simply cannot get enough of. Not to mention that this was the episode that won the show the Emmy for Best TV Film, is why this episode makes my number 4 spot. Coming in at number 3 is hands down my favorite second episode of Sherlock yet, and that would be The Sign of 3. I love this episode for so many different reasons. The fact, of course, that it's mostly another character-driven episode, built primarily around Sherlock's relationship with John. The fact that it's also a mystery built into a wedding. Oh, and also the fact that Sherlock Holmes proves that he is the ultimate boss by managing to not only simultaneously write a kick-ass best man speech, but also solve 3 seemingly unrelated murders all at once. This is hands down the best bit of character we've gotten from him, because it shows him at his absolute best, as well as showing that he does actually have some emotion buried somewhere in that mind palace of his, not to mention the fact that the episode closed out with one of my personal favorite songs of all time, which is why this episode makes my number 3 spot. And at number 2 is the finale for Series 3, as well as the episode that won both Cumberbatch and Freeman their Emmys, respectively, His Last Vow. This episode sees Sherlock and John going up against Charles Augustus Magnuson, the head of a chain of newspapers, who's also known as the Napoleon of blackmail, due to the fact that he makes it his personal business to know each and every single person's dirty little secret. He's a different kind of foe from Moriarty, albeit still a challenging one for Sherlock, as it's revealed that, like Sherlock, he has a mind palace of his own, revealing that he does not keep anything on paper, that each and every bit of dirt he's got on people resides in his mind. It also certainly doesn't help that Lars Mikkelsen from House of Cards gives an absolutely chilling performance as this ultimately really creepy villain. Not only does this episode provide yet another great villain to test the sleuth's mettle, but some nasty secrets are also revealed about John's newly betrothed Mary that have some serious repercussions going forward. After my number 1 spot, I didn't think that Sherlock could get stretched anymore past his limits, yet this episode shows that that is still very much a possibility, as Sherlock is left with literally no choice but to kill his opponent, showing that he is very willing to do what he can to save his friends, which is why his Last Vow makes my number 2 spot. And coming in at number 1 is every Sherlock fan's favorite episode. It was the episode that kept people tense for 2 years on end, and that would be the Series 2 finale, the Reichenbach Fall. This was the episode that finally paid off in the final confrontation between Sherlock and Moriarty, as Moriarty kicks off the episode with a triple heist that proves to only be the beginning of his mission to discredit the detective. After a long and deadly game in which Sherlock is presented as a fraud, Sherlock and Jim finally meet on a rooftop where Jim wants him to jump in order to complete his modus operandi of the discredited detective taking his own life. And on top of that, as an extra precaution, he's also got 3 snipers on John, Mrs. Hudson, and Lestrade if Sherlock doesn't cooperate. The tables are turned even further when Sherlock attempts to use his wits to outwit his nemesis and reveals that as long as Moriarty is alive, he can make him take down the snipers, causing Jim to end up taking his own life, forcing Sherlock to make the jump, proving once and for all that when it comes to his friends, Sherlock is willing to go above and beyond to save those whom he truly cares about. It was the episode that, in my opinion, furthered the story the most, as well as the characters, also being the only television show in recent history to have fooled audiences into believing that the show would actually kill off its lead after only 2 seasons. For about 10 minutes, or however many minutes that were left until the episode ended. It is still, at least in my opinion, the best episode of Sherlock yet, which is why it makes my number 1 spot. Well, that's it. That's my official ranking of all 10 Sherlock episodes that have been released. Don't worry, I will do a full recap of the entire 4th series once it is finished in 2 weeks. In the meantime, comment below, let me know, do you want to hear more about Sherlock, or do you just want to hear more about television in general? Don't worry, I've got a lot more videos coming. Whatever you want to see, comment below, click the dislike button, subscribe, follow me on Twitter at Movie Nerd Review, go to my website, movienerdreviews.com. Also check out my other channel, Movie Nerd Reviews, and also check out my brand new podcast, the Movie Nerd Podcast. I think that's it. I'll see you guys next time.